there. All right. Well, welcome, folks. Yep. I see Council Member Gooden is he's on, so I'm going to get him set up as a panelist here. Good. He should be on here shortly. All right, looks like that's starting to work for you.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
How you doing? I think we're doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Excuse my casual attire. I've been out and about at some polling places here today, so please excuse me.
Hopefully, you've gotten to see a lot of folks out and about voting.
Not really, actually, not really today. Turnout was, I think we're going to finish about 14%. I think.
Wow.
Which is higher than normal for this kind of election here in Cincinnati. So it's like, do we rejoice? Do we,
No.
Is it good? Is it bad? So.
Well, it was strange because really we were tracking for something higher based off the early vote, but the weather really, it was almost like it was designed to depress turnout. Like it hit again. The worst storm was right at 5 o'clock when people were getting off work. So, but we were tracking higher in the early totals. It looked like it might have been, might have beat the average. Like if we get 17 to 20 in a primary, we're doing fantastic.
Okay.
Are we though? Are we?
Well, no, but I agree. But by our standards, I should say.
Yeah. Understood. Well, we'll go ahead and get started with the discussion. How I usually do things is I kind of sound off the ground rules for panelists and participants, and then we do introductions, and then we get off into our topics for the evening. So welcome everyone who's joined so far. We're excited to have you here to get to know the candidates better in a comfortable, relaxed setting. So I always try to let people know that this is real life. So folks may have to come and go. Spouses, children, and pets may interrupt us at some point. That's fine. That's real life. We're here to be real with Cincinnati. So as always, disagreements are great. They're going to happen. But I ask for respect to be maintained all throughout. We're all adults, should not be too terribly difficult to do that. And that's pretty much it. Participants, you are welcome to join us in the Q&A or the chat to ask questions or make comments, whatever you'd like to do there. Councilmember Gooden and Galen, you can monitor the Q&A. I don't mind if you type in answers or interact that way. It's whatever you would like to do. And let's go ahead and get started with introductions. Gentlemen, I'd love to hear from you guys first, since you are my honored guests tonight. Galen, we've met a little bit before, but Councilmember Gooden, I actually know very little about you, so I would love to give you the first 1 to 2 minutes to just introduce yourself and why you're hoping to win Cincinnati's vote this November.
Hey, well, thank you very much. My name is Steve Gooden. I was appointed to council back in November of 2020 by Judge Winkler when Jeff Pastor was suspended from council. I have the unfortunate historical, I'm a historic first in a bad way. I was the first person appointed to city council by a judge in the history of the county, given the extraordinary circumstances that had occurred there. So it's a first that I'm not exactly proud of, but have been honored to serve on council here these past few months, and really hope that I can continue in some fashion. That wasn't my original plan, but that's what's become my plan over time. And I want to thank you, Stacey, for putting this together. And Galen, we met very briefly, I think, for Black History Month when we put the flag up. So nice to see you again. I can tell you just a little bit about my experience. It's a bit varied and probably not the usual path to city council. I started out my career working in government at the state level Left that in my early 20s, joined the Peace Corps, really for lack of anything better to do. Served in the Sahara Desert for a period of time, right on the Algerian-Moroccan border near the Western Sahara, which is something that was a very big deal to me, and frankly kind of checked some of my idealism about what the world, what does and doesn't work in the world. When you join the Peace Corps or do something like that, foreign service, you really kind of throw yourself at the world in the most literal sense possible, and the world sort of throws itself back. So you kind of learn a few things, particularly about activism and community engagement and community buy-in. And frankly, we were working projects that the community didn't want or care about in some cases, and it was an eye-opener for me. Came back to Cincinnati, went to law school at the University of Cincinnati with the plan of being a full-time JAG lawyer. Ended up not having a spot available for me. I went to work at the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office for a period of time where I did a lot of felony prosecutions, including a lot of murder, felony type prosecutions. Post 2001, suddenly the Army had spots for everybody. So I ended up going in as a JAG reservist as a first lieutenant. Ended up sticking around for about 10 years in the reserves, did about 2 years of active duty, including a period of time as a JAG prosecutor down with the 18th Airborne Corps at Fort Bragg. After after returning for my last bit of active duty, I ended up joining the law firm of Graydon, Head and Ritchie, which is a downtown Cincinnati law firm. Very, very active in civic affairs, very active in a lot of community affairs. A lot of folks know us through, the Saturday Hoops program is something that we have been doing with CRC for a long, long time, and very active at Rothenberg Elementary. A lot of my former law partners have gone on into public service in some ways, both on both sides of the bench, going all the way back to, Pete Strauss, to Bob Taft, to Rob Portman, and we currently have 4 of our alumni are serving as federal judges. So there's a lot of folks that come from that law firm who they're very happy to sort of loan us to public service. So I'm very mindful of that, of that history there too. So, I mean, I frankly got involved in city politics through an odd way, which was while working at the Graydon Law Firm back in 2009 during the Mallory administration. I was brought in to help be one of the lawyers to help solve our pension system shortfalls. And I continued that work on through into the Cranley administration, which led to our, at the time, historic deal where we agreed to a 30-year funding mechanism for the pension. We're going to have to, unfortunately, revisit that, and real fault of our own, because a lot of the assumptions that were used at the time, including average life expectancy, have changed considerably since 2013, all to the good for the individuals, but to the bad in terms of how it's funded. As part of that, I started working on the city's budget a great deal, because the pension plan, we're the only municipality in Ohio that still has a pension plan, and it has a monstrous impact on our budget, not just in terms of how we fund it, but in terms of how the bond rating agencies view Cincinnati's credit, and how we have to borrow money constantly for projects big and small, everything from potholes and what have you. A lot of that is done on revolving credit, so our bond rating really matters. I started presenting to bond rating agencies like Standard & Poor and Moody's when they came to town to examine Cincinnati, and really took a deep dive into our finances, and continued to do that work on and off throughout the Cranley administration. Also did some work with the economic development department, kind of chasing down developers who had not made good on their incentive on the deals that they got, or supposed to, on the conditions of their incentives. And also did some work and was working on, frankly, when I was appointed to council, trying to help bridge the gap between the city and the county and the metropolitan sewer district. None of these are particularly interesting or sexy ideas or kinds of work, but they matter a great deal to the day-to-day of council. And you hear that a lot in my comments in council, which is, guys, can we afford this? Here's the unexpected impact of what we're considering in terms of our day-to-day doing business, and it weighs on me heavily when I come from a union background. My father was nearly 40 years in the UAW, and a lot of my good friends and folks that I respect in the city are in the labor movement. And that's one of the reasons that when we talk about probably some of the things we'll talk about later tonight, in terms of budgetary shifts and impacts, I think I see folks in the labor movement who are, and their families who are dependent upon those living wages that are being paid. I see them, they're in my mind's eye every time we start talking about budgetary changes and movement. So that's sort of where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I do come from a very mixed political background. I was endorsed by the Charter Party. That may be the only endorsement I receive. I don't know. There may be another endorsement coming. There may not. I was a very vocal and open critic of Donald Trump, and did not support him in either election. Some of my close friends in the Republican Party, I think, do take odds and issue with that, and that's to be expected. But that's fine. That's life. So I've tried to take as much of a nonpartisan and kind of down the middle approach as I could on council. I can say I'm a fiscal conservative, libertarian in pretty much every other way, and that's that's all I know. It's all I know how to do. So anyway, but thank you for letting me come on.
Oh, absolutely. Do you mind if I ask you, what have you, in your couple of months serving on council, what have you enjoyed most about it?
Well, there's quite a few things. I mean, number one, I am absolutely fine mixing it up with folks. I think it's very healthy to have a back and forth with people, whether it be in social media, whether it be in council chambers, whether it be with your colleagues. And I think one of the things that had kind of happened over the past year or so with all these investigations is that the remaining council members have been afraid to engage. Some of the new council members candidly didn't know how to engage. And I think there's always the fear, frankly, when you engage, of getting hit with a follow-up question you can't answer. Mm-hmm. And I really don't. I just see it as part of my job. I mean, we're not getting, we are getting paid to do this. I mean, we are getting paid to do this. So, I think the least we can do, absolute least we can do, is when a citizen, makes an inquiry, we should respond. So I do enjoy that back and forth. Even when it's unpleasant and argumentative, that's fine. I also have really, really enjoyed getting to know this current council. I think one of the sad stories, I shouldn't say it's a sad story, it's a good story, but what's sad is that the story of the current council and how well it works together really isn't being told. I mean, there are some really quality individuals who are on their way out. Let's start with Jane Michelle Kearney, who, I have a huge amount of respect for, even when we disagree. She's just, and I've known particularly I've known her husband for a long time, just great people, great citizens, great public servants. And I think Greg Landsman, who I always don't agree with either, is just a quality person who engages and talks and responds. I get along with Mr. Seelbach well too, and I also get along with Wendell Young, who I think is frankly kind of getting a raw deal right now, and what's happening with him. So, and I think it's very unfair, frankly, as a side note, to lump him in with the other individuals and what they've been accused of and charged with. So, but I mean, I have truly enjoyed interacting with most of the folks on this council, and I think, and we have worked together, I think, pretty well, and I think we have an opportunity to do some pretty good things before the end of the year. I really do. But we are sort of an interim council. Most of the folks are termed out, and it's just, so that is a kind of a strange set of circumstances. But it's not a bad group.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and it sounds like you echo a lot of my own sentiments, that even when things get heated, in therapy we call arguments working, as long as it's not just tearing each other down for no reason, working through those issues together in a way that's productive can absolutely be fruitful. And I would love to see a council where the constituents feel safe doing that with their governing body. So I appreciate your input and your experience. Galen, how about you? Why don't you take a few minutes to introduce yourself and your background and whatever you want the voters to know.
Sure, sure. Galen Gordon, I'm running for city council because I believe we need proactive and intentional leadership from our city government. We need to be proactive and intentional about how we attract top tier corporations and how we plan to fill storefronts through entrepreneurship. Be proactive and intentional about how we incentivize families to live or even move into our city limits. So we have a fantastic city. I love Cincinnati and got plenty of opportunity. And I just want to make sure that that feeling is shared by residents of all 52 neighborhoods. That part's very, very important to me. More about me specifically, father of two young ladies. We live here in the West End. I have not always lived in the city of Cincinnati, which I think that's can be a plus. So grew up in Madisonville and then moved out to the burbs and was very, very excited and happy to see a lot of the progressive activity that was happening within our city as I became into my adult years. And so after college, I actually went to a Quaker institution. And after college, sold real estate, and through real estate came back downtown to where I moved here in '08. And so I've been in the hospitality industry. I've been in the service industry for all my adult life, and I've been in hospitality specifically in tourism for 11, 12 years now. And so that part's very, very important to me, taking care of our service workers, staff, employees, and hospitality. Huge for me, big deal. And so I'm excited for this opportunity to run for Cincinnati City Council. Thank you.
And how's your campaign been going so far?
It's going very well. I'm a first timer, so I think we all are. And so certainly there's been a lot more attention focused on, the primary. So, I think here in the coming weeks, things will really start to ramp up. But there's been some good feedback so far. And so I'm excited about it. Yeah, we're going to keep moving.
Very good. And thank you both for joining tonight. I'm Stacey Smith, also a first-time candidate. My background is basically, I grew up in the Winton Woods, Finneytown area, and I was homeschooled until my senior year of high school, and that's when my parents thrust me into public school. Don't know why, but it worked out. I loved the school. The year that I was there was a very big tax levy year for them. If their tax levy did not pass, they were going to essentially lose their music and sports departments in the district. And if you know anything about Winton Woods, it's that their arts and music equally are like the heart and soul of that district. So that was my first ever experience in anything political, was knocking on doors, passing out flyers, participating in rallies to get the community's support to pass this levy. And thankfully it did pass, and graduated from there, went on to receive a scholarship to the late Cincinnati Christian University, where I started out in music education because I really wanted to impact middle and high school students. And I know that, those who participate in music programs are really deeply impacted by their teachers. And I wanted to do that. So, but instead I ended up switching to psychology because at the end of my freshman year, my cousin died by suicide. And at that point in time, the only way I figured I could avenge him or, kind of continue his legacy was to help people with their own struggles. So graduated with my bachelor's in psychology in 2014, went on to attend their Master's of Arts in Counseling program and received my master's in 2017. And I've been licensed and practicing mental health therapy ever since. I work full-time and part-time, so a little bit on the exhausted side all day, every day. But it's great. I love it. I love serving. And the reason that I'm running for city council is because through my work as a therapist and a case manager, I see a lot of the needs that are being unmet, particularly on the mental health side. Like, for example, if I have a student, which this has happened multiple times, if I have a student who is, relatively safe, but needs to go to Children's Hospital for a psych eval, the only option I have for them is the police. I could drive them there myself, like realistically speaking, but ethically speaking, that would not be okay. That would be a liability issue, and there are very limited options for helping people who are in crisis get the help they need outside of the police. And that really troubles me. It's also not a collaborative approach. So, like, for example, in my mind, a functioning mental health crisis team will go to this individual who needs their help, assess the situation, and try to get in contact with this person's care team if they already have one. Who's your counselor? Who's your case manager? Who's your primary care physician? Who's on your team who can help us in this situation as we try to assist you and to get you safe and functioning again? And that just doesn't happen. So I would like to see that. I also think that it's really mind-boggling that, and this might be a little bit of a silly example, but I think it's pretty mind-boggling that everyone knows what to do. Let's say they're outside and lightning starts striking. Everyone knows what to do. Get away from the trees, get indoors, get out of and away from water. And we have very few people in the country that, get hurt or killed by lightning strikes every year. It does happen, and I don't want to minimize that. But we all know what to do. It's just common knowledge. But we have tens of thousands of people in this country every year that die by suicide. And yet very few people are equipped to ask the very basic questions and to see the warning signs. So again, we'll train people for like active shooter situations, fires, which definitely should be done. But mental health it's put on the back burner in so many different situations, even in the conversation surrounding like policing, affordable housing, things like that. I think mental health gets thrown out in those conversations, but I don't see many people who know how that works and functions on the inside. And so I give myself, two options in these situations when I see a problem. I'm either going to shut up about it or try to do something about it. And so I decided to throw my name in the hat to try to do something about it. And here we are today. So
it's awesome. That's commendable. You said if you have to transport a child, like in a mental health situation, they have to call the police to do that?
The police have to transport them.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
As I think, I'm like, well, who would they call otherwise? But I'm just, why, that's just not something that we should be having the police do. But
Yeah.
We should figure it out. That should be, wow.
Yeah, it's a problem. It really is.
It sounds like an opportunity. What it sounds like.
I like that frame of mind. I'm gonna steal
I'm an entrepreneurial spirit, and so really my approach to a lot of things, which is another reason why I'm excited about city council and why I've always been engaged and interested in knowing how our city functions, is that there's we want to create solutions, right? And so when there's problems, I see those as opportunities. Sometimes we can figure something out, and so we shouldn't be involving our police in that. But then who? But there's an opportunity there between the people who are inclined, like yourself, mental health professionals, probably would have a better idea of who the best type of company and the best type of safety and security measures they need, insurance that they need. Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining it's the police, one, because, if things go awry, and then two, for insurance reasons, I guess. But it just seems kind of crazy that we just assume that the worst is going to happen, so that we need the police. Certainly, I don't know enough about
Yeah.
that per se, but it just seems like that's an extreme approach to something that probably happens often.
It's a very complex issue. I mean, there's multiple times a year where I have to have clients of mine transported to the hospital for safety reasons. And again, they're stable. They're not escalated when this happens.
I mean, I was about to say, I mean, are they going off, or is just sometimes they just need to go to the hospital?
I've had one that was violent
Yeah.
when they had to go. Not I've had two that were violent when they had to go. And I was assaulted in those circumstances, but still, it's still not to the degree where this individual needs to be handcuffed and put into the back of a police car. This is a child.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think sometimes, our wonderful police officers, sometimes I don't know that they want to be in these positions that they're in either.
They don't. I can tell you firsthand they don't.
Same. I've talked to officers and they're like, if this gets taken off of our plate, like we'll be glad for that. And I understand that 100%. But yeah, that's something that I am hoping to step in and address as a future council member. And with that, we'll kind of start on our discussions for the evening. I think Steve and I's our topics are really kind of about good, equitable governance. But Galen, I would love to start with you because you wanted to focus on more of a present day, literally present day concern. So I'll turn it over to you.
I certainly, people are concerned, and so issue 3 obviously is a big issue that was on the ballot today. It has been since early voting, and so I know that the two of you have some approaches and reasons for your approaches, and so and I don't have the necessarily legal aspect or the mental health aspect to come with that level of intelligence. But with issue 3, we have to do something about housing. We have to do something. It's definitely a problem, crisis, if that's what we want to call it. And so, for me, if it takes $50 million a year, then that's what it takes. My concern that came with this particular amendment or issue was just going into perpetuity and not really having, again, going back to my entrepreneurial mindset, if there's a problem, then in my mind, what's it going to take to fix it? And so then I have to then lay out, then, it's going to take, whether it's this amount of money or that amount of money, whatever the money is, the reality is what the reality is. But then at some point, what's the goal? We're going to come to a solution. And so for me, if that was 20 years from now, if it was $50 million a year for 20 years, if it was $50 million a year for 30 years, if that's what it takes, then so be it for me. Unfortunately, just going into infinity, that part I could not collect enough for me to be to vote yes. And so it's a tough one because I certainly am someone who has experienced all of the gamuts of housing, and so I've experienced homelessness, I've experienced gentrification, and so I have, I've had to move because my apartment building was sold and couldn't afford the rent there anymore. So I definitely understand this, and it's another reason why I want to be on council, because I want to make sure, again, that we're proactive and intentional about finding solutions and making sure that our residents truly see that we're taking this matter seriously, and whether that comes from the city or that comes from private. I think it's a good idea, private public partnerships. We have to do something because we need to be able to have, and it goes back again to me in the hospitality industry. I've got housekeepers and I've got maintenance people. I've got front desk folks, who are trying to feed their families, on not a lot of money, 30 some, $40,000 maybe. And these folks need to be able to have clean and safe housing within our city limits, as far as I'm concerned. And so we got to figure out something so that we can address this issue. And again, I don't fault or blame. I think that our residents who got the signatures, got the petitions, I applaud their efforts. And I applaud everything that they did, because these folks have been fighting and asking and begging our city to do something about the housing issues, and our city has not held up to the promises
Yeah.
to this point. And so I'm all for the effort, and I'm all for a ton of it. So, and we just need to keep pushing and make it better.
I would love to ask you both, and I'll chime in as well. Let's say whether or not issue 3 passes, because it's out of our hands now. It's been put into the hands of the voters. Something is
As of 4 minutes ago.
as of 4 minutes ago. Yep,
Right.
it is now out of our hands. It will be decided.
Yeah.
But whether or not issue 3 passes, is affordable housing, one of your priorities, if you're elected? And if so, what are some of your ideas to address it? So even taking issue 3 off of the table, how would we as council members approach our affordable housing crisis?
I'm sorry, Galen, do you want to do that?
I'll go and I'll let you go. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't want to get ahead of you.
For me, my approach is equitable housing. And so from equitable housing perspective, I think certainly affordable housing fits into that. But what I'm looking at more is figuring out how we can stabilize rents without penalizing landlords. Can we have some type of opt-in program for landlords to hold rents, right, for 5 years? And maybe then that landlord gets some type of tax break or incentive from the city that would basically make up for whatever that dollar amount was that they did not raise the rent. And what you do there is, that's a way of making housing affordable, because you think about so I am a landlord now, and so you think about, as a landlord, you raise the rents every year $25, $50, right? And so in a year, what is that? $600 maybe. 5 years is $3,000. So it's not a lot of money really in the grand scheme, but you raise those rents for whatever the reasons are that you have. But for a renter to have that rent go up every year, and if their income doesn't go up necessarily, or have that rent go up, maybe their income does go up, and now they've got more money, but their rent has stayed the same. Now you've kept that renter there. You've kept that family in that neighborhood. So you're creating stability. Stability not only in the neighborhood, stability in that family. You're giving people, now their income, hopefully in 3 to 5 years, has improved. Maybe they're in a better situation where they can actually purchase a home, and maybe they're going to purchase it in that neighborhood. That's just one of the thoughts that I had. And maybe also, when you're talking about affordable housing, maybe we should incentivize people to stay in the city limits. Maybe we should give some type of incentive if somebody stays in the same neighborhood or stays within city limits for 5 years. That's a lengthy amount of time. Instead of people just hopping in and hopping out, maybe you can do something, some type of incentive or credit for them from that perspective. And if you're able to hold the rents, when you're talking about the rents, you hold those rents, then that kind of pushes those rates down or keeps them from going up as fast. That's a way you can help with making housing more equitable. And then also for homeowners, we can kind of protect our neighborhoods and getting people to stay within the city limits. Give people a reason not to move out of here. We got work from home going on. And so people are not going to have the same passions to stay wherever it is that they're living. You know, if you can do the same job from Costa Rica. So we've got to figure out some different things we can do. But from equitable housing perspective, I think that we can stabilize rents without penalizing landlords. And there's a few other things we can do too. That's at least one option.
And just in case there's anyone who is confused on the wording, can you define differences between like equitable and affordable? Like I know that they are, you know, very similar, but there are some differences between the two.
Yeah, for me, equitable is it's more affordable. When you talk affordable, it's actually built in to where you're talking about, you know, 30% of the area median income. And so you're actually, some people will still consider that subsidizing housing, even though those folks may not be getting some type of physical stipend. You know, it's just, the word has been demonized a little bit. For me, equitable housing is trying to come up with some other solutions to be able to curb the increase in the rents. And then also, for me, you know, the city owns a lot of land, or the city has influence over a lot of property. And we can figure out some ways. We can take some amazing neighborhoods like a Fairmount that's got a lot of vacant property, and we can go in there and we can put up owner occupied or even rentals that, you know, people could afford. You know, you go in there, you don't have to. You know, I turn around. You know, people come in, they buy something for 30 grand, and then they turn it into $180,000, $300,000 property, and it's beautiful. But that's not necessarily, I think, in our best interest. And so for me, if we're being proactive and intentional about creating equitable opportunities, if you've got a cluster of land or a cluster of homes, you know, you go in and that you can buy that home for 10 or 15,000, 20,000. It doesn't have to be a $300,000 property. Now it's an intentional decision that has to be made, but you can go in and you make it a $70,000 home, or you make it a home that can be rented. So also for equitable housing for me is, you know, why don't we have duplexes anymore? You know, why do we take away from that? So we got to get some density. So we have to fix some of the zoning for me. So that's equitable. There's a different approach when you're talking about just creating more equitable opportunities versus affordable, really is tied in specifically to income.
Agreed. And Councilmember Gooden, I can see the wheels turning. What are your thoughts?
I have been talking about affordable housing for a long time, and ironically, you know, we had, with the vice mayor and I, had begun this affordable housing subcommittee well before issue 3 hit the ballot. I mean, we knew that it was sort of like a defining issue of this era, and I do think it is inexcusable that prior councils hadn't tried to take this up. I mean, that's somewhat defensible in a way, because I mean, traditionally the federal government, through tax credits and through programs like CMHA, had managed and sort of driven the affordable housing market in discussion. But as we look around the country, other cities, particularly cities, you know, what I would call mid-sized big cities, you know, like what I would consider comparable to us, like Charlotte and Columbus, certainly, and Cleveland, you know, have taken a much more proactive role. So we're behind the times on all that. I would acknowledge that. And I don't want to relitigate issue 3. I would just say my general approach to issue 3 was this. You know, there's this old saying that one of my coworkers says all the time, and I truly have come to believe it as I've gotten older, and it is, you know, for every complex problem, there is a simple answer, and it is always wrong. And I thought issue 3 was a simple answer to a complex problem, which was, let's just allocate $50 million a year and see what happens. And it's a thing where the devil was in the details, and the details were not there for me. And it seemed to assume that individuals stay in this affordable housing market indefinitely, and that's not always the case. But in terms of what I'm going to recommend and what I'm hoping comes out of our affordable housing subcommittee, which will continue to meet irrespective of what happens, I do believe issue 3 is not going to pass today. So I do believe we're going to have an obligation, and a lot of eyes will be on us very quickly, and rightfully so, to come up with something. And I can tell you, what I would like to see happen, and what I've been advocating for is a multi-step approach. And I'll go right to what Mr. Gordon said. Zoning, it plays a bigger role in the shortage of affordable housing here, in my view, than cash. Most of Cincinnati is still zoned single family. Mr. Gordon, I can tell you what's happened to the duplexes. The 2, 3, 4 families, which are the backbone of what I call the best affordable housing, as opposed to these like giant, monster units that, frankly, that, Josh and Mary and those guys, run. It's those 2 to 4 family units that fit well into neighborhoods, that can be closer to public transit, closer to job opportunities. There are zoning barriers for them. There are certain neighborhoods that don't want them, and we're just going to have to man up and deal with that. Okay. Number 2, we're going to have to lift some parking minimums and density requirements as a part of that to get there. This city, 40, 50 years ago, had 500,000 people in it. Now it's got barely 300,000. We can support the density. We need taxpayers of all kinds. We just absolutely do. I mean, that's number 1. Number 2, we don't have anybody in the city structure in the development department who can shepherd these things through. We need a dedicated series of staff in the economic development department to push these kinds of developments through. The margins are extremely tight on affordable housing units. They don't have time for the administrative delays that folks run into in a regular sort of market rate development. So we got to have some staff there. But third, we do need money here. And I know a lot of folks just thought it was sort of window dressing or some sort of a ploy. But I do think the $34 million HUD fund, which is a revolving fund, is a good first start. We are hoping to, in theory, double that with corporate donations. I also think that we're probably going to see anywhere from 5 to 9 million of affordable, American Rescue Plan dollars go into the other housing trust that we have. So the ultimate goal for me anyway, would be to have a scenario where we have low to zero interest loan products, and we know there's some banks that are very interested in doing this to help folks who don't have good credit get into the affordable housing market. That they could get grants, forgivable grants of up to $50,000 to assist in rehab, which means looking at existing housing stock, or to build and construct new 2 to 4 families throughout the region. And in exchange for the grants and the low interest loan, they would have to keep the properties affordable, which is, at some level of AMI for 15 years. And that's sort of based on a model program that Charlotte, North Carolina did to great effect. And it seemed as though that anywhere from $60 to $70 million in a revolving fund. And again, and also favoring and featuring contractors and homeowners of color, and women and minorities and folks who have difficulty sometimes getting credit, getting into that market. You're helping to build wealth, folks who can be landlords or live in the properties themselves and manage them. And it's a good thing. And also we have to take a regional approach here. This cannot be a city only program, because we also know that the housing stock, particularly in these 2 to 4 families, is much stronger in some of the neighborhoods right outside the city limits, Silverton being a prime example. So I do think we cut ourselves short if we're just looking at it city limits only. It's one place I would respectfully disagree. I think it has to be a county-wide approach, and they have a shortage too. So, but I mean, really, if we're talking about a revolving fund that is replenished, periodically, either through repayments or others, I mean, really anywhere from that $60 to $80 million range, frankly, it's a lot of money. And it's about what we can, it would be a continual thing, particularly if we focus on the vacant abandoned buildings. So, I mean, I know like I said, that's a complicated answer to a complicated question, but we got to focus on the regulatory piece. And this is, we got to lift some of the zoning requirements. We got to lift some of the density and parking requirements. We got to get some of the red tape at City Hall out of the way. And then we got to make money available, but it has to be money with strings attached to it. And that is targeted, because I truly believe that the affordable housing that works is affordable housing that has people and that can actually give folks a chance of moving on into market rate housing,
Yep.
near public transit,
Yep.
near job opportunities, near private capital.
Yep.
I mean, and some folks just think it's a fairy tale, but I'm sorry, it has worked. That's why we moved away as a country overall. That's why we moved into the voucher model, which has been a mixed success. But the idea was to move away from like the large scale housing projects where folks just tended, we had a concentration of poverty and a lack of access to opportunity in those kinds of situations. And we've got to get to a place where folks who have subsidies can live in basically any neighborhood they want, and have access to that. I mean, that's where we have to be headed. And there will be resistance that way. And it's so funny. I look at my Twitter feed and I get some, these angry tweets about it. Then I get on, I went on one of these WLW shows of the day, and they're absolutely killing me, saying that I'm too want to build too much affordable housing in all these different neighborhoods. And they're right, actually, I do, because I think that's part of the problem is like, if we're going to have more affordable housing, it can't all go to, go into East Price Hill or the West End. I mean, some of those neighborhoods have 60 to 70% affordable units right now. And, there are folks with market rate properties who want to, do, and it's just, like I said, it's a complicated problem, but I think hopefully we are going to be moving somewhere in that direction, particularly, and I could be absolutely wrong, issue 3 could pass, and then it will be an entirely different conversation if it does. Because we'll be back trying to figure out how to make it into something that we can manage and afford. So,
and I definitely, I think I appreciate, both of your perspectives on the matter. I think my approach, it's just a little bit of background, particularly this year, but in past years too, working in part as a case manager means that I don't just help with the mental health side of things like diagnosing and treating, but part of my job is holistically trying to help the family care for itself. And a lot of that means helping them with housing. I've had multiple families this year that we have had to, help them apply for emergency funding. The program that I work with has paid rent for some individuals so that they would not get evicted. And, just through that, with the possibility of eviction on the table, we would have to look at options in the city, like, okay, if this happens, where can we get you moved into and rather quickly? And that's when I really started to see like, oh, options are very limited. I mean, we've got to try to keep the kids in the same school that they're in. We've got to keep parents near their job if they have one, near their family. So lots of different things to consider. And that's what really, opened my eyes to the shortage. I'll admit I was probably quite ignorant of that fact previously, just because housing and numbers and things like that are not my wheelhouse. However, I really do believe that we have a lot of people who are running for council who want to address exactly what the two of you brought up. Funding, zoning is a huge one. I'm trying to educate myself on that as much as I can, and I just am horrified by some of the things that I see in that regard. And I look at that and I say, okay, we will probably have quite a few individuals on council who are willing to and ready to take on these specific issues. But there are deeper issues when it comes to housing that I feel that I could be helpful with. For example, just housing people is not enough. A lot of individuals, you can house them, but for many different reasons, they might not be able to sustain that housing. So two programs in particular, Bethany House and Talbert House, they do a lot of case management in their housing programs because they work with individuals who have mental health concerns. And because of that, even if they are in a home, they can't sustain it. So what do we do to help those individuals so that they don't, get put into a home and then and then get an eviction on their record because of issues that are beyond their control. How do we help these programs that are holistically taking care of this person so that when they get housing, they can sustain it? They can sustain a job, they can navigate, paying rent and budgeting and things like that. So my approach would be to really focus on programs that help individuals who have a hard time sustaining. I worked with a family, this was a couple years ago, where the parent, we connected them with so many resources, but we weren't actually like reading the situation. So, we got this parent a new place to live. We set them up with job interviews. We got them vouchers for daycare and like several other things in the span of like a month or two. It was all absurd, absurd in a good way. But what we learned is that because the parent had their own trauma and mental health concerns and probably other disabilities at work as well, they couldn't manage all of those things. And one by one, these things that we had set up for them dropped off, and they eventually ended up back on the street again. So we realized, okay, we need to address what's going on with parent while making sure that they can be housed, because, if someone doesn't have a roof over their head, their mental health is probably not going to do very good either. But also making sure that we address these underlying issues while progressively helping them with these other things in a way that's manageable for them. So when it comes to affordable housing, I'm all for the funding resources. I am all for figuring out how to deal with this zoning mess. But what I would like to do is to focus on, okay, how do we actually help individuals who normally have trouble sustaining housing, or like all of the homeless veterans that we have? What are their barriers, and what can we do to address those so that we don't get them in a house and then they get right back on the street again? Because we don't want to get people in housing and then just essentially help them rack up evictions. So that is what I would like to focus on, is some of those deeper rooted issues, which don't impact all of our, everyone who is struggling to find housing or is homeless. But for those who it does, that would be my focus. It looks like I'm kind of keeping an eye on projections. It looks like as of right now, issue 3 is leaning towards the no side. And I think right now they're only counting like the early votes. So we shall see how that goes throughout the evening and over the next day or so. But good discussion on affordable housing. Councilmember Gooden, I would love to shift gears a little bit to what you would like to present, which, if I remember correctly, was focusing on, well, without revealing what you said.
No, go ahead.
Focus more on good governance. So what would you like to present to the panel tonight?
Well, I'm happy to talk about any number of things, or to answer questions, or whatever we would do. And I'll be fairly brief and to the point. I mean, one of the things I did want to talk about a little bit was what we can do at the municipal level in terms of restorative justice, and which is a topic that's strangely close to my heart. I've spent a lot of time. I did a lot of felony prosecutions, drug prosecutions, and kind of was one of the folks who concluded the war on drugs was just an absolute abysmal failure. And I've also spent a lot of time working in the treatment world, and chaired the board of the Center for Addiction Treatment over in Ezra Charles, which over the years has kind of transformed itself from a small alcohol rehab center to a cocaine center, to a crack cocaine center, and now it has an opioid fentanyl specialty. And just they're big players in the community in terms of what they do. And they were one of the few places, first places here in Cincinnati, that treated addiction disorder as precisely that, as a disorder. and provided 24/7 medical detox treatment. So it opened my eyes a lot to what they do. So, I've been, of the mindset that particular drug possession and addiction should be trying to be transitioned out of the criminal justice system to the extent possible. And I don't think that's, certainly a controversial idea on this call or really in the city or among most thinking adults anymore. But what has been amazing and eye-opening to me on council is how little power we have at the municipal level to affect these sorts of macro changes. But at the same time, we oversee a police department that is the heart of day-to-day interactions between the city and the citizens. I mean, that's, if we take a much broader look and we look at, say issues like qualified immunity and things of that nature that are really in the forefront of people's mind as a result of the war on drugs. City council really has no power whatsoever to address that. Those are court doctrines and are addressed at the federal and state level. But again, we are overseeing a police department, which is by far the most contact anyone has with their city government, unless you go out and talk to your trash guy every week. It's police officers that we interact with. So one of the things I wanted to talk about a bit is kind of in that lane of things that we can do. And one of the things that I've been trying to call attention to wherever I can is when folks talk about, wanting to defund the police and talk about the number of folks that die in custody, I am struck by how many of these interactions that go bad, whether it be George Floyd or others, start as traffic stops or misdemeanor arrests. I mean, George Floyd wasn't being investigated as as some drug kingpin who was part of some sort of complicated drug, operation. It wasn't narcos or whatever. I mean, he was accused of passing a $20 bill. I don't even know if it was a real bill, $20 bill or not. There's a misdemeanor arrest. And I think that to me is got to be one of the big focuses going forward. The citizens I talk to, whether it be Avondale, Evanston, other parts of the city, the West End, East Price Hill, all over the city, there are a lot of folks that are still calling for real police presence in terms of investigations into serious narcotic trafficking, into violent crime that follows it sometimes. I mean, they still want a police presence. What we're really talking about is how do young people, particularly young people of color, end up dead in routine traffic encounters and routine misdemeanor arrests. That has got to be our focus in my mind, because I think just shifting the conversation to let's get rid of the police department, or let's cut the police department in half, or let's do it, that's not right. And Stacey, I think it also goes to your point, and this is one of the reasons why I've been pushing beefing up our mental health response teams is, we have this situation where police officers are often forced to be social workers, often forced to be babysitters, are often forced to participate in calls. Again, those are the kinds of scenarios with these young folks that could, if the officer feels threatened, turn into a situation that becomes violent. And I know there's all kinds of other issues. Again, it's a complicated issue. There's issues probably about implicit bias, cultural bias, other things that play into that at times. But these are, it's these kinds of routine interactions that I do think we can make a difference, or we can make a difference on council. The big macro policy issues, frankly, sometimes are just beyond our jurisdiction and ability. But it's making sure that our officers are trained, making sure that our officers understand, and we're ahead of the curve in one respect with the collaborative, but there's more work to do. And what I've been challenging the mayor and some of the other council members is, as we look to refresh the collaborative, we were ahead of the curve on banning chokeholds. Okay, we were 20 years ago. Thank God we did that. We were, if you think of Eric Garner and some of the other folks, who we lost over the years because of these bad practices. We were ahead of the curve, frankly, on racial profiling. I mean, they actually began to keep those stats. We were one of the first jurisdictions in the United States 20 years ago to keep those stats. We now can be ahead of the curve, I think, on two areas. One is enhancing our mental health response and taking this Kyle Plush moment we're having to revamp our dispatch so that these things are dealt with in a better way at intake. And that's something that we really are pushing toward right now. And I think it's something that I'm challenging everyone on. The second thing is I do think we have to deal a little bit with what I call the militarization of police officers that has happened in a lot of metropolitan areas over time. And some of it's appearance, some of it's reality. But I do think we're making some steps along those ways, particularly in some of the new uniforms. And the last thing I'd leave you with is something that I'm really working on hard too, as we talk about the restorative justice that is within our control and jurisdiction, is how we handle marijuana possession in the city. I have been tracking, we essentially decriminalized small, possession of small amounts. And I know that's still a controversial thing in some quarters, but in my mind, it's an equity thing. And I think it was the right call. But we still hand out these civil citations that are overwhelmingly going to young men, particularly young men of color. We are working to address that and figure out what in the hell is going on there. We think we know. But the other thing is we're trying to figure out some way to do in fact, I have a meeting with the Public Defender's Office in the morning on this topic to affect some sort of mass expungement for all the young people over the years who got these misdemeanor marijuana possession charges in Cincinnati and don't know that they're allowed to have them expunged or can't afford to get a lawyer to go get them expunged. And even these misdemeanor possessions count as drug possession charges that can be disqualifying for everything from military service to student aid. Yeah. And we're trying to figure out a way, and there are a lot of procedural problems with it, but we're trying to figure out a way to get those wiped off because it's really fundamentally unfair that someone, we don't charge people criminally for that anymore. And there's a lot of people, thousands of people walking around with disqualifying criminal convictions from the time that we did. And that strikes me as a fundamental issue of just fairness. So those are the sorts of things that I think we realistically can be pursuing here in the next year or two that I think would make a difference in lives. We're never, we're not in Congress. I'll never be in Congress. You too, Mike. You guys are younger. You're starting your careers. I'm old. But there might be some opportunities to do some good things here within the sphere of influence that we have, and that was really the message that I wanted to put out there tonight.
And to clarify, in case anyone is unfamiliar with the term that Councilmember Gooden has brought up, restorative justice is essentially it's an attempt to repair harms caused by crime, like not just on the society as a result, but also, like individuals who are convicted of something that is no longer, criminalized, or it's restoring what took place because of that harm, holistically speaking. And I really appreciate what you said about, we do offer, mental health training to an extent to our police officers. I don't know exactly what that training looks like. I would love to find out. But I have a hard time believing that it really gets to what they really, really need to know when they're walking into a situation. I see so many times, a little bit here in Cincinnati, but I'll see a lot of different videos where an officer gets called to a mental health crisis. Someone is in active psychosis or having some kind of episode, and they may or may not have a weapon. Officer approaches, and because the person is escalated, the officer kind of starts making demands. What I wish people understood in that situation, or our police could get trained on, which this would be very extensive training, is a couple of things. One, people need to understand that if someone is in psychosis or is in an episode like that, they cannot be reasoned with. It's impossible. You have to bring them down from that episode first before the part of the brain that allows for reasoning to take place kicks back in. Now, as a trained mental health therapist or as a social worker, oftentimes we can be like, okay, this person has this known diagnosis. This is how this incident began. Here's what's happening. And we can determine whether or not this person can be reasoned with. If they can't, we know some ways to hopefully bring them down from that. Secondly, and I think this also gets forgotten, when the situation is happening, the kind of primal brain has taken over, the survival brain has taken over. And because of that, it's scanning very actively for threats. And even if the person is not like in their right state of mind, their brain can still detect, oh, someone with a gun is approaching me. They're not going to say, oh, this is a police officer, they're here to help me, let me calm down. Their brain's going to say, that person has a gun, escalate, escalate, escalate. And these are the types of things that I think get missed when it comes to, you know, police officers handling mental health crises. That I would
Yeah, there are a lot of them don't understand the basic fight or flight, you know, process. Well, the program that we're trying to do is, I mean, there was a pilot program a couple of years ago that was fairly good, but I thought, but not well developed, which was to have a specially trained, you know, just a group of dedicated officers who had heightened training in this and who were called out for specific situations. And also we do have licensed social workers on duty now, you know, to intervene. But again, part of that goes back to 911, because if you don't staff the call correctly, it doesn't matter. I mean, you may have your social work team, your trained mental health response team, just sitting there, you know, and it's like, you know, we had some jurisdictions outside of Cincinnati did really well during the height of the opioid epidemic with their with these, you know, drug response teams that would run out with Narcan and other things. But if they got the call wrong, it didn't matter. It was too late. Person OD, you know. So a lot of it really does boil down to not just having the resources, but deploying them the right way.
One other thing that I would like to see, as far as the restorative justice, especially as it pertains to race relations and policing, is, you know, an emphasis on kind of changing the way that we do bias training. And I know that this will not be popular with the FOP. I know this will not be popular with a lot of people. I am okay with that. But what I would like to see is, you know, I understand that we do implicit bias trainings, but, you know, to my knowledge, most of that goes to the extent of, here's what implicit bias is, here's what it looks like, here are the things to watch out for. What I would like to see happen is actual testing, because you can test for implicit bias. It does have to be done carefully because things can be skewed in the wrong direction incorrectly. But actually identifying and on our police force, like, okay, who are officers who may, you know, if they are subjected to words like violent, criminal, and then they're shown an image of a black man versus a white man, their eyes go to the black man, that's a problem that needs to be identified. And, you know, quite frankly, I'm not afraid to say this, if you're going to have lethal weapons strapped to you, and this is a bias that you hold, I'm not okay with that. So I would like to see our department emphasize less bias training and more bias testing before we have more, you know, more crises like the ones that we've seen in the United States happen. But I've been talking plenty. Galen, I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter.
Definitely, we need, I think you're talking about the mental health response team, full agreement with that. Seems like we need folks in each district, if they aren't already, and all hours of the day and night to be available. Certainly, you got to utilize the resources when you have them, for sure. I like the idea of the testing. It would seem like that something like that should be done, if it's not already, should be done in the academy, but and wouldn't hurt to be done now. So if something like that's not happening, I feel like when we go through some implicit bias training, that there is some testing that we do. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. Certainly there's variables, and you probably don't just want to go off of one form, but that's what people like yourself and others who have this knowledge, that's what you're good at and understanding. So to me, it makes a lot of sense. It's one of those where it's like, you know, if you're not doing wrong, there's nothing to worry about, you know, if you're not. So, you know, so it's just one of those, so I'm all for it.
And do you have anything to add, just kind of to the restorative justice, or kind of how our city treats, criminalization of like addiction, or even prostitution, things like that? What are your thoughts on the matter?
There's a way to we we got to get the police out of being involved in so many situations that it's not necessary. So
Like the Price Hill monkeys.
like exactly, and some of these things I go back though, if they get called, then they're going to answer the call. That's what they're supposed to do. So I think that people like Steve are on the right track, and hopefully yourself and I, Stacey, and I think you said this before. It seems like the folks who are running in this next election, I feel like people have truly now, the folks who are running have housing on our minds, and the folks who are running have, how we police on our minds. And so two big topics that I believe that the folks who are running all, feel like it needs to be addressed. So I'm excited about it.
Very good. Councilmember Gooden, are you able to see the Q&A that that may or may not be on your little Zoom thing?
Yes, hang on one second here. I'm trying to do this from my iPad, so I'm a little, when I call it up, it goes away. Okay. I can't see you, but I can see it now. Okay.
Okay. There's one question on there for you if you'd like to answer, and then we'll kind of give.
Okay, which one here? I got the Ford Foundation.
You're looking at the chat. There's specifically
okay.
a Q&A.
Oh, got it. I'm sorry.
I could read you the question.
Oh, here it is. I see it.
Okay.
Okay, so you didn't vote for Trump at either election, and should Trump have been impeached both times? Well, he certainly should have been impeached in January of this year over the riot/insurrection on January the 6th. I mean, in my personal opinion, I'm not sure what it's got to do with city council at all. But in my personal opinion, he was absolutely morally, ethically, and legally responsible for that. The first impeachment, I guess so. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I thought it was so attenuated, and I thought the investigation into whatever did or didn't happen on that Ukrainian phone call was so complicated. I never formed an intelligent opinion either way. I was not a Trump fan. I always thought he was bad for the country, bad for the Republican Party, and really played to some things in our culture that are not positive. I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, you get some folks responded to him. Not all of the policy I disagreed with. I do frankly think that a lot of the stuff that Trump did to call attention to some of the trade abuses with China, I think that was generally correct. I think that was shameful that neither big party in DC were addressing those issues for so long. I think they haven't had a definite impact on our middle class, particularly the destruction of our manufacturing sector over time. And I think it's something where a lot of folks in DC turned a blind eye because it was the popular thing to do. And there's a lot of corporate money flowing their way who wanted to ship labor to China and do cheaper things. And I think that, and get cheaper labor. And I think that's one of the reasons that Trump had a real appeal, to a lot of working class folks. It wasn't all racism and dog whistles. I mean, there was an economic piece to it. And it's a shame that someone, I think, like him, picked that issue up, because I think that is a progressive and vital issue. And it's a human rights issue, the way workers are treated in China. He definitely should have been impeached the last time, and I think he should have been convicted. And the first one, frankly, the details elude me a bit over time. I remember it had something to do with a phone call with a bunch of Ukrainians. So I don't remember, but
I think in a position of leadership, it's good to be able to say what you said, like, I did not have enough information to make an informed opinion. There's sometimes there's power in saying, I don't know. I wish more people
I
had
say
that
it to my
ability.
kids about every damn day over here. So something. So
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate the both of you. We have just a few minutes left, and I would love to give each of you a minute or two to just kind of, wrap up your thoughts of the evening or anything else that you would like the voters to know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got
I
another
think, I
Q&A.
think,
Go ahead.
I think you're being volunteered, council member.
That's okay. I'm addicted to Q&A now that I see it. Um, Mr. Walton, I agree with NAFTA. I think that I agree with you on NAFTA. I think NAFTA was a huge mistake. I grew up in a union household. With my dad was a UAW laborer for almost 4 decades, and he was one of those people back in the 90s who was griping about NAFTA and free trade and what it was going to do to the working class and the middle class, and nobody listened to people like him back then, and I think that was absolutely the wrong thing. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't have had some sort of limited globalization without shipping so many of those jobs over there. And I frankly think if you look at, as I do, affordable housing as a symptom of income inequality, there is no way we can ignore these giant global, the effect of globalization on working class people and wages. It depressed wages. It just did. I mean, my dad was a high school graduate, who learned to be a mechanic in the Army and supported a family of 4, as a factory worker. And we didn't have like a lot of money, but we did well. I mean, we went to, decent schools, had a roof over our head, and that's how it was. That isn't possible these days. My dad will be one of those guys working 3 jobs to get by. So, but I will say, thank you, Stacey, for putting these together. I mean, it's great to meet you. I've seen your face on social media quite a bit. Galen Duggan on social media. And certainly don't tell your kids about it. I think half the mean comments I get are my kids under fake names, particularly my daughter. I think this is going to be great. I can't wait. I am thrilled, frankly, that we're getting through this mayoral primary in issue 3. And I think folks are now, I would expect the citizens to really start turning their attention to the council race. I don't really think they have at this point. I do think there will be, with the vaccination numbers improving by the week. And by the way, if there's anyone who's watching this, we're throwing out like close to 40% of them at the city with the health department and our mass vaccination events. Please go. I mean, there's plenty. There's really no excuse anymore. But that said, I do think we're going to have a chance to be out in person and meeting folks and meeting voters. And, a lot of folks kind of roll their eyes and say, oh, this is a circus. There's all these people pulling petitions. We may have 40, 50 people meet the ballot, make them up. But I think that's a sign of health. It's clearly a direct reaction to 2 things: the corruption scandal, which really has invigorated a lot of folks. But we're just at one of these kind of strange tipping points as a country that we seem to come to about every 40 years ago, where a lot of people, and it's partially generational, I think, where certain issues, just coalesce. And I think, Mr. Gordon, you nailed it. Where I think this is a time when it really is about our police community relations, affordable housing, racial equity, gender equity to a certain degree, and new concepts or maybe I shouldn't say new concepts, but maybe a new and broader understanding of what it's going to take. And that's, where we are. I sort of see my role in that, to the extent I have a role as someone who agrees with most of these concepts, but also who has sort of this, I keep going back to my time in the Peace Corps, of being someone who knows that sometimes well-intentioned, broad brush solutions don't always work, and they sometimes run off private investment, they run off private capital, and they leave us in a worse place. So what I'm trying to do is trying to find some way to bring some of these concepts in a way that are workable and that don't really damage the basic sort of infrastructure of our city in a way unintentionally, that hurts people and keeps us from being a big. Because at the end of the day, Cincinnati, we need more people of all stripes, and we need more jobs, and we need more opportunity, which will cure a lot of the problems that we're addressing. So And I'm very hopeful about the city. I really am, but it's going through a massive change. And if we had another hour, I would love to talk about. And if you have another group, Stacey, one of the things that I hear over and over and over is this amazing shift of energy from downtown and downtown neighborhoods and or adjacent neighborhoods into our other neighborhoods and into the other business districts. And what's going on in College Hill, Pleasant Ridge, and Mount Airy, which is about to just explode, and Madisonville, which is exploding. Evanston, where property values are going, it's a mixed bag because it also contributes to the affordable housing crisis. But we're seeing just an explosion of activities post-COVID in the neighborhoods, and it's a really exciting time in Cincinnati. But it does challenge how we traditionally think about, or not we, or some folks think about the city, and how the metrics that we should go by is what's happening downtown. That's not going to be the case here within 4 to 5 years. So I think we're very interesting times, and that's also going to push us to think about things like Vision Zero and making sure we're more pedestrian friendly and have better public transit options. Our neighborhoods are going to have to link up and are going to have to be developed in a way that they never have been before. So anyway, thank you for the time.
Absolutely. And this will be available. I know this is election night. People are focusing on that. This will be available for people to watch on YouTube later. And usually have more people watch it afterwards than do presently. So, lots of people will get to hear from the two of you and your perspectives, both of which I appreciate. Galen, how about you? What would be your sign off for the evening?
Sign off. I want to thank you, Stacey, certainly for providing these opportunities, these panel opportunities. Not only does it give our residents and those watching and listening an opportunity to engage with us and see us, but also I think it gives us an opportunity to learn and get to know each other. So I'm very, very thankful, and thank you, Steve, for all that you've been able to share. Since we have a couple of military veterans here, I want to do a little plug. I have an event where we're supporting veterans. There's an organization called Vets and Brews, and it's going to be at Rebel Metal Brewery on May 13th. And so myself and another gentleman are going to be slanging beers. I'll be a guest bartender. So I love to support anyone who has served our country. And I've got a lot of family members who have done that for us and made that sacrifice. So that's one thing we're going to be doing. We'll be there from 5 to at least 7 at Rebel Metal down on Central Avenue next, 2 Thursdays from now. So there's an opportunity to come down there, and somebody, if you're a vet, somebody will buy you a beer. Absolutely. To council, I want to make sure that anyone listening understands that my focus is going to be equitable housing and supporting and growing our neighborhood centers. I think that's key. And so as Steve had touched on, how these other neighborhoods are booming and developing, these opportunities are coming. That's going to be key to make sure that we give people a reason to live in these neighborhoods. And so you think about any neighborhood that you think of that is doing well, that's desirable and people want to live there. I would bet that they've got a nice little marketplace, a nice little center, whether you call it a business district or not. I know some of our neighborhoods don't necessarily have business districts, but if you think about how they are all kind of built, they're kind of built that way. So we need to get back. Like you said, Bond Hill is working in there. There's a lot of opportunity there. And Evanston, I was just out there this morning, and just a lot of opportunity there as well. And just get back and with intent, proactive and intentional, make sure we fill these storefronts with businesses with people of color, businesses that the neighborhood desired, businesses of service, so that we can continue to grow all of Cincinnati. Because I'm telling you, with this work from home thing going on, people, they don't have to live where they do anymore. So that's not the only thing that's going to make that difference, but we got to find a way to incentivize and encourage our residents to move into the city, and the ones who are already here, give them a reason to stay. I always, it always hurts when a young family or a young homeowner or a young renter comes up, and then they fall in love with someone, and then they want to raise a family, and then they want to leave the city. And I'm just like, oh no, let's stay here, make it happen here. We can do it here. I'm a firm believer in that. And so I think one of the cool things or the memes or whatever nowadays is to say I hate it here. And it always is troubling to me. I'm like, what? And so no, I say we can do it here. And so anyone who wants to help me do it here, please, you can look me up at GalenForCincinnati.com. That is my website, GalenForCincinnati.com. Learn more about me. Come on, sign up to volunteer. We need all the help we can get. And I'm the type of person, I don't need to be on city council. I want to be on city council because I believe I can do something for our city. I'm going to keep working the job that I do at the Hilton. I love hospitality and I love service, and I love engaging and working with our business community and with tourists. And so, I'm also one who wants to support. And so I can assure you, Stacey, and you, Steve, especially after our conversations today, that I'm one who will come out and help you when you guys go to Canvas, or if you have an event or something like that. And I don't need to be the glory hound. I don't need the football. I can get in the trenches for you, and I can move a table, or I can, collect a ticket. So that's the kind of person I am. That's, I think, the kind of person that we need, someone who's willing to be a connector and to be a conduit, and willing just to be able to work with folks. So Stacey and Steve, I will support you and help you, especially after these conversations and what I've heard from you this evening. So thank you.
And thank you both for joining. I love having these because, as a voter, I always feel like I know very little, despite, trying to do research. You don't really get opportunities to hear for an extended period of time, candidates talk and share their ideas and just gain perspective from how they present themselves. So that might be me just psychoanalyzing people when I don't mean to. It's a habit, I'm sorry. But, I appreciate you both. As for me and my campaign, one of the first questions, which I think was sarcastic, but I'm not entirely sure, when I threw my name in the hat was, aren't you just a professional listener? And I was like, well, yes, but, don't we need a professional listener on city council right now when so much trust is broken? And so, I want to be there to help reestablish trust and to help change things that are happening in City Hall so that it is less likely to happen again. And, I think no one that I've talked to in the city has said, no, we don't need additional mental health resources. Like, mental health, no, we don't need that right now. Like, that's not what we should be focusing on. I haven't heard a candidate. I haven't heard anyone go against that. In fact, I've heard a lot of candidates say that, they would like to focus on mental health as well, which is awesome. But it concerns me not having the background of like therapy, social work, and just the inner workings of that. Is it possible? Sure. I think it would be more productive to have someone who is in that field for a while to help set some of these things in motion and then pass it off, which is what I intend to do. I am not going to be a career politician. I want to help serve my city, get some of these things in place, and then eventually, go start my family, maybe go to law school in the future, those different types of things. So, but I appreciate the both of you joining. Again, this will be on YouTube later for others to view. So, I'll make sure that the two of you get the link so you can share it with your supporters or anyone who you just want them to know more about you. That these are usually pretty good videos for people to do that. But with that said, I say we all sign off for the evening, watch those election results, and keep going forward in our campaigns and our missions.
Good spending time with you all. It really was.
Likewise.
Take care. Good luck, and be doing some signature gathering in the Clifton area. Galen, if you guys want to come out and knock some doors with me, we can do it as a group.
When you
we'll
doing
outnumber the voters. I'm planning to go out about 10:30 on Saturday morning. If you want to go, the people in Clifton don't get up early on the weekends. Okay, they get very, very irritable if you knock on their door